No Cooper Flag, no Maliq Brown, no problem. Duke basketball still wins the ACC tournament. Now we get set for the big dance. Number one seed in the East region, starting with games on Friday in Raleigh. It doesn't get better than this. Let's go Duke, baby.
You are Locked On Blue Devils, your daily podcast on the Duke Blue Devils. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody. Welcome into another episode of the Locked On Blue Devils podcast. My name is JJ Jackson. It's so great to have you here with us today on Monday, March 17th, 2025. Locked On Blue Devils is your one-stop shop where we discuss everything going on in the life of Duke athletics, and we focus a whole lot with what's going on with Jon Scheyer and this Duke men's basketball team. They are fresh off an ACC tournament victory in Charlotte. Find out last night that they are going to be a number one seed in the East region, the number 2 overall seed in the entire field, and Duke gets set to start their action on Friday in Raleigh when they will take on the winner of American and Mount St. Mary's. On today's show, Josh Cox is here with us. We're going to talk about everything that you need to know with this Duke basketball team and so much more. If you have not done so already, please be sure to follow and subscribe to Locked On Blue Devils for free, wherever it is that you get your podcasts. You can leave us a 5-star rating and written review. Also, you can watch our show each and every day on YouTube. I want to say hello to all our everydayers out there who watch the show each and every day on YouTube. Like this video, comment, and have discussions about Duke basketball with us here on YouTube. And most importantly, subscribe to our channel. So without further ado, very excited to welcome him into today's show. The aforementioned Josh Cox is here with us, man. And here we are, ACC Tournament champions. No Cooper Flag, no Maliq Brown, and still able to get the job done, man.
Yeah, no Cooper, no Maliq, no problem, really.
Yeah.
Obviously a scare there on Friday night with the UNC game, with a major comeback there from the Tar Heels. But ultimately, Duke showed that, they are the class of the ACC. And, to think that Duke won that tournament minus 2 of their top 6 or 7 players, just a really, really impressive run for this team.
With that, they're now 31-3 on the year, and they earn a 1 seed in the NCAA tournament. We'll kind of backtrack a little bit because I do want to get into that Carolina game. I want to get into the Louisville title game with Duke in particular and some of the things that we saw. But right out of the gates here, Josh, a 1 seed for the Blue Devils. I think they had a really, really strong case to be the number 1 overall seed. When you look at the fewest losses of any of these major teams in the field, that's Duke. When you look at being the number 1 team in the AP poll, winning their conference tournament, beating Auburn head-to-head. But nonetheless, they're not. They're not the number 1 overall seed. They're number 2. They're a 1 seed nonetheless. I really like their pool, though.
Yeah, I think you make a good case for Duke there on the overall number 1. But, at the end of the day, all that truly matters is the number 1 seed in the East.
Yeah.
For Duke starting in Raleigh and then heading up to Newark for Sweet 16 and Elite 8 before the Final Four. I think that was the most important thing. But yeah, I agree with you. I think the argument for Duke to be the number 1 overall, I think there was already one. And then for Auburn to kind of go on a little bit of a losing streak here at the end of the season, I think losing 3 out of the 4, 3 out of 5,
3 of their last 4
games. Yeah. That was, I'm sure they were kind of pleasantly surprised to be the overall number 1 there. But, I don't think that Duke necessarily is being disrespected. I believe that there was a narrative that was created and justified back in those early season, tournaments and the ACC SEC Challenge where Duke went 2-14 or whatever it was. And I think that narrative was that the ACC was super weak this year, and they're probably right. And it's really hard to overcome that when you're trying to get that overall number 1 seed. But once again, like I said, I think most importantly is getting the number 1 seed in the East region.
Somehow, some way, those North Carolina Tar Heels made it into the NCAA tournament as the very last team to make it into the field. We'll get into that a little bit later in this one as well. But again, looking at Duke, number 1 seed of their 5 national championships, 4 of them have happened because Duke was a number 1 seed. The one that wasn't was the very first one back in 1991 when Duke was a 2 seed. But other than that, if Duke has won a title, it's been because they are a 1 seed. I feel better knowing that as well. The last time Duke was a 1 seed was 2019 with Zion Williamson. We saw how that season came to a close there with that Elite 8 loss to Michigan. which still not over to this day. But if Duke wins it, historically, it's because they've been on the one line like this.
Yeah, for sure. And this team, I mean, this team is built differently, man. This team is built differently than most of even of those previous 5 national championship teams. I think this team is most built like that 2001 team in a sense, of different characters, right? Different players playing different positions for sure. There's no, Jay Williams on this team.
Yeah.
But there was also no Cooper Flagg on that team. So, I think this Duke team is built differently. I do believe the number 1 seed. I believe there are some Duke teams that, the number 1 seed would just be too big of a target on their back and they would not be able to perform at the best of their abilities. I believe this team welcomes that target. I believe this is completely fine with all eyes on Duke. And I think this team is, I think there's a little bit of this team that's like, hey, we hope we make it to the Final Four and we hope that Auburn is the second team standing and we have a rematch for the title. I think there's a little bit of that dog kind of in this team. And, I think they're built for this time of year for sure.
It's our Duke Blue Devils and the Florida Gators that are actually the betting favorites right now to cut down the nets and to win it all. Says a lot about what Duke has done. How can you not be more optimistic about this Duke team, given what they just did without the best player in the sport, without Cooper Flagg? And from what we're hearing, we heard from John Shire last night. He was on ESPN's bracketology show giving updates as to what would take place with Cooper Flagg. Per usual, you don't get a whole lot out of the head coach when it comes to the injuries. He kind of beat around the bush a good bit. But what we learned is that today Cooper Flagg is going to practice. And when you're telling me that, that's all I need to know. And knowing how tough Cooper Flagg is, I truly feel like he's working his way back to play on Friday.
Yeah, I would think so. And then obviously with it being a 16 seed, and we understand that has happened before now. But with it being a 16 seed game, if he does play Friday, I believe, obviously it's going to be limited minutes and it'll be a way for him to kind of work his way back, because obviously that second round matchup against either Mississippi State or Baylor is going to be the game where you really are going to need him and want him back. And Duke has just proven over this past weekend that they're still a really good team, a really good team, even without Cooper Flagg on the floor. And so, I would look for John to push him, but not to push him to a sense where he could risk, him missing a second round game as a result.
All right, so let's see what happens with Duke as they get set to open up NCAA tournament play this upcoming weekend there in Raleigh. I'm going to look at our bracket. Let's take a look at the East region, look at some potential matchups down the road, and so much more. This is Locked On Blue Devils here today. Locked On Blue Devils here today, brought to you by our friends over at Factor. Eating healthy doesn't have to be complicated. With Factor, you get chef-made, dietitian-approved meals that are ready to heat and eat in just 2 minutes, so you can fuel your body without the hassle of cooking. Factor meals arrive fresh, never frozen, and with 40 options across 8 dietary preferences each and every week. You can customize your menu to fit your goals, whether that's Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, or Keto. I love Factor meals, keeping you on track with healthy, delicious meals without the time-consuming prep. Eat smart with Factor. Get started at factormeals.com/factorpodcast and use code FACTORPODCAST to get 50% off your first box plus free shipping. Once again, that's factormeals.com using code FACTORPODCAST to get 50% off your first order. Factor Meals is a proud sponsor of Locked On Blue Devils. The show today also brought to you by SupplyHouse. Get the supplies you need from the site made for the skilled trades. SupplyHouse, whether you're in plumbing, HVAC, or electrical work, SupplyHouse is the reliable way to order products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and latest product info to help you get the job done right. Plus, with a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from 400-plus top brands, you'll find exactly what you need delivered fast from coast to coast. Do you need help with an order? SupplyHouse offers expert support and industry-leading service, so you'll always talk to a real person. And for trade pros looking for an extra edge, their free TradeMaster program offers exclusive perks like a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every single order. Join the TradeMaster program today at supplyhouse.com/TM and start ordering plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies with just a few clicks. Use promo code SH5 for 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com. SupplyHouse is a proud sponsor of Locked On Blue Devils. Okay, talking Duke basketball here with my buddy Josh Cox. We're getting you set for the NCAA tournament this upcoming weekend. Duke basketball in the East region, and the NCAA March Madness field has laid out the 16 teams that will compete in the East region, although I guess it's truly 17 right now, because we have to see between American and Mount St. Mary's who wins that game. Being a 16 seed, in so many ways, it does not matter. This should not be what keeps Duke from winning a national championship. If it were, we'd have much bigger problems. So when you look all the way down the line, 1 through 16, we mentioned Baylor and Mississippi State. We've got the Jeremy Roach connection that people are already making, Caleb Love possibly later on with Arizona. Tell me all the highlights that you're seeing looking at this region.
Yeah, I mean, certainly that second round game. I mean, you have two teams there. You have Baylor, obviously, not only Jeremy Roach, but VJ Edgecombe there, a highly touted freshman. They definitely have the talent. There at Baylor, they've just not produced wins out of that talent this year. The Mississippi State, actually one of the best offensive teams in the country, and one of the, obviously one of the 14 SEC schools to make it. So that second round matchup is intriguing. And then as you get down there, I mean, Duke's already played Arizona on the road and gotten the win there, but there's definitely the Caleb Love connection there. But I'll be honest with you, I think that it's the tournament, so you're going to have to play tough teams. But that 4-5 matchup, Oregon Arizona, doesn't necessarily scare me if I'm Duke. Once again, you've already beaten Arizona, and you have to realize this was like Duke pre December as well, and we all know that Duke's hit a new gear here in the starting about mid-January on. That these teams that played Duke early in the season just did not see, and so I think that's good, favorable. And then obviously I think Wisconsin's a 3 seed is favorable as well. I mean, I think if you told Duke they had to play them, great. I think Alabama's obviously as the 2 seed, that's a tough one. The SEC, they've been at the top of the top 2 or 3 teams in the SEC all season, along with Florida and Auburn and Tennessee. Those have kind of been the top 4 teams in the SEC. And Alabama's right there with them. But, once you get past the Sweet 16 and you get into the Elite 8, I mean, you're going to play these top teams. And so I actually have no problem with this bracket, whatsoever. I think there are some potential upsets on that lower part of the bracket. I think Vandy could cause some problems. Obviously, St. Mary's too. I mean, that 7-10, either one of those teams for Alabama in the second round is not going to be an easy game for them. So, overall, I think Duke did fine in the bracket as far as it's not as crazy as it probably could have been. And, I'm trying not to be overconfident here, man, but
it's hard not to be.
Put whoever you want to in this bracket with us, and we're gonna go to the Final Four.
And let's be honest, everydayers know this about me. They know this about you at this point too, Josh. With the number of years that we've been looking at NCAA tournament bracket fields, you could have Duke as a 6 or 7 seed, and given our name recognition as a program and what we do in March Madness, I'd find ways to tell you how it was a favorable draw for Duke, because that's just the standard that we have each and every year, and that's why we love being big-time fans of this program and that sort of thing. Alabama's interesting as the 2 seed for the Blue Devils. They can score points like crazy. They were in the Elite 8 a season ago against the North Carolina Tar Heels and beat them to go to their first ever Final Four. One of their best players, Grant Nelson, got hurt this past weekend in the second half of the semifinals against Florida in the SEC tournament. 6'10", major factor for what they do, and his status is uncertain kind of moving forward here. So that could be something to watch and monitor there. But you look up and down this field, man, I'd expect there to be upsets. Everyone always likes to look at the 4 versus 13, the 5 versus 12. Those are where all the big upsets come in. But for Duke, it's, cliche, but I truly believe, take this thing one game at a time. And it's going to take 6 wins to ultimately be the national champions. And I think that means we're going to need big-time performances from everybody, right? Maybe Cooper Flack has a big game. Con Knipples been excellent for Duke, fresh off winning the ACC Tournament MVP. Hopefully we have another big Isaiah Evans performance or something like that to push us along. Sion James is getting more and more. You know what I'm saying? Everybody will have to contribute as we run through this.
I mean, yeah, you forgot Tyrese Proctor.
I did. Holy cow!
Yeah. JJ, just to be honest with you, man, I obviously this could get clipped out by a team that beats us, and I could be made to look like an idiot here, but I really feel like that this team it's almost upset proof, and I mean upset proof in the sense that I don't believe this team loses any time in the first or second round, and probably not the Sweet 16. I feel like this team, because as you just mentioned, we just walked through 6 players, and that's not counting Mason Gillis, and that's not counting Caleb Foster or Patrick Gongba, of these guys that can really turn it on, man, and can really, help a team win a basketball game. And this team is not reliant on Cooper Flagg scoring 25 points in a game to get a win, even though that's obviously a good thing. And Duke likes it when they can get 25 points from Cooper Flagg, but it's not necessary. And so I think this Duke team hanging their hat on the defensive end of the court, committing to rebounding the basketball, making it difficult for the other team to score, controlling the tempo, pushing when they want to push. I think that's really the key. And John Shire and the coaching staff have done a really good job of not only putting the team together, but then putting together the way and style in which they play. And these guys have embraced it. And so I don't see the top half of that bracket personally playing a major, major factor. I believe it's going to be in that Elite Eight when it's like, hey, these are the top 8 teams in the country, and you got to go out there and play your best basketball.
Yeah, no, it's interesting kind of looking at how these brackets were built this year and kind of things that went into it. We mentioned North Carolina getting in. So there were 4 teams from the ACC that made it, but we had a tournament record, 14 teams, all from the same conference, all of them out of the SEC. And you look here in our region alone, there are 3 of them when you look at Alabama, Vanderbilt, and Mississippi State. So in a lot of ways, for the first time ever, they're having to kind of break rules that have been set, because previously, you wouldn't see schools from your conference until a certain point. If you played a school 1 or 2 times, that kind of indicated when was the earliest you could play them in a field and whatnot. And we're looking here, there's a possibility you've got Vanderbilt and Alabama, an SEC versus SEC matchup in the round of 32. So many things had to be kind of shifted for that to happen. And looking at the top 4 seeds by region, when you look at them all drawn out, 1 to 68, the lower your number when you add up the total of their spot, obviously the more difficult it is. So when you look at the South and you look at some other regions there, the South is the most difficult. That's where Auburn ended up. And then Duke is actually tied for the easiest with the West region. Duke is the 2 seed, Alabama the number 6 seed on the 2 seed line, Wisconsin 12, Arizona 16. So that adds up to 36, the highest total there. So it's just so interesting how they had to put this bracket together, because there were so many oddities with how they fielded the 68 teams that made it up, if that makes sense.
No, it makes a lot of sense. And let's be real. If this was a season where there were 14 that were in the field, we would be like, hey, listen, we understand that maybe the records are a little bit, different and not as good as some of the other conferences and whatever. That's the same argument that the SEC legitimately has this year. I mean, they did beat up on each other in those conference games. I mean, you have a team like Kentucky who, did they get double-digit losses? I believe they're at double-digit losses, and it's kind of like, that's a good team. I mean, that team beat Duke, in November, early December, whenever it was, or I think November, and like, that's a good basketball team, and they have double-digit losses, and so it does make it difficult. And I do not envy the committee when you have to take into effect, strength of schedule and strength of conference and all of those things. But here's what I'm hoping, what has happened over the last 2 to 3 seasons is the ACC at the beginning, everybody's like, oh, they're not as strong as they used to be, and then you look up in the Sweet 16 and like, there's the ACC,
littered with ACC teams. Yeah,
I mean Louisville. This isn't a Louisville podcast. Louisville has a legitimate gripe.
Right.
They're an 8 seed. I think they were 10th in the AP poll this week, and they're an 8 seed. I would look for Louisville to have a chip on their shoulder and I would not surprise me to see them, pull the upset in the second round, and you know what I mean, and be in the Sweet 16, right? So, and we know Clemson's good.
They're paired with Auburn as an 8 seed, and the game is going to be played in Lexington, Kentucky. Much easier to get there for Louisville fans. So even when you look at that, like the geography of it all, really favorable for Duke that they're playing here. And I'm even thinking from injury perspectives, like with Cooper Flagg, there's not these big travel days that go into, like if Duke wants to have around-the-clock treatment for all their guys, they're going to be able to do that this entire week because they just got to run 20 minutes up the road, and they're going to be able to play these games.
Yeah, it does matter.
Yeah.
And you add the proximity, the fact that it'll be a home game for Louisville. Once again, that's if they win the first round game for sure. But that potential matchup, it's like you've got Auburn who cannot feel confident going into this tournament. They can't. They're good. And this is no shade to them, but like you can't lose 3 out of your last 4 heading into the NCAA tournament and feel confident, right? So, they're going to win their 16 seed game, and that's fine. But they know that second round matchup potentially with Louisville's on the horizon. They know that gym will be, a lot majority of Louisville fans. And they cannot be happy. They cannot be happy with that draw.
All right, let's talk about Duke. They have a 1 seed because they won the ACC tournament. Some really exciting wins that took place over the weekend, over North Carolina, over Louisville. They're ACC tournament champions. We love it. We'll continue our conversation with Josh Cox after we take one more timeout here on today's show. Locked On Blue Devils here today, brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. That's right, March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories, and even who's cutting down the nets. I love it so much. It's fast and easy to use on the FanDuel app. When I win, I get paid instantly. There's no waiting around. So go ahead. All you got to do is just visit FanDuel.com, get started right now, and get in on the college hoops action all tournament long. FanDuel is a proud sponsor of Locked On Blue Devils. Also, want to take a moment to tell you about our Amazon Bracket Breakdown.
The NCAA Tournament is here, and so is the Bracket Breakdown.
Locked On Podcast Network and Amazon Fire TV channels are teaming up to deliver NCAA Tournament coverage like never before. Watch studio shows featuring former players and Locked On's local experts as they guide you through every upset, buzzer beater, and bracket matchup.
Stream it all for free on Amazon Fire TV channel. Search Bracket Breakdown to see it all for free.
It's your team every day.
Love it. Go check out the first episode. We recorded it last night. I was a part of the program, so go find all of that there on your Fire TV channels. Let's get back to Locked On Blue Devils. All right, here we go. We're going to keep this thing moving. We're talking Duke basketball, getting set for a March Madness run, thanks in large part to what they were able to do in the ACC tournament. Give me some thoughts, man. We mentioned injuries against Georgia Tech. Then we've got to play our hated rival for the 3rd time this season. We get the royal sweep for the first time in nearly 20 years. Duke was able to do that, beating North Carolina for 3 times. And then we're trailing by 5 at halftime. Some people still felt good. I was not one of them. I thought, oh, no, this is where a loss is coming along. And we got the job done, man.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, this is the best week of the year, right? This first round, second round, March Madness, it is just what basketball fans live for. So that's the first thing, right?
Yeah.
Looking back on what Duke was able to do over the last few days, I mean, you have the comeback win at Georgia Tech, and with that, it was the whole, losing Maliq and losing Cooper, in that, and then being able to just put it together. And obviously, thanks to Con Knippel, 28 points and leading the way there. And then in the Friday night game against UNC, you had the exact opposite effect. I mean, you had Duke get up by, 24 points at one point and really looked like they had the thing, in the bag. And that run at the end of the first half, it was like, man, this is going to be a blowout and like all this. And then, to UNC's credit, they could have, and I know that Joel Berry and company said this over and over again at the end of the game. They could have packed it in at halftime. They really could have and said, look, it just is what it is. And they didn't do that. And credit to them. Credit to Hubert Davis. Credit to, to the team there. and they made a legitimate comeback. I mean, that was a legitimate comeback. And, hey, fortune goes both ways in any type of sporting event. And Duke was fortunate at the end of that game. I mean, that free throw, he made the free throw. That was the tie basketball game with 4 seconds to go. And more than likely, chances are you're going to overtime. And you're going to overtime with a team in UNC with all the momentum. Uncle Mo on their side. And
all the foul
keep
trouble.
That foot out the lane, man.
Yeah, exactly.
Keep that foot out the lane. You got to stay in your lane.
Stay in your lane. I love it. LeVar Ball. All right,
but then to finish it out, the Louisville game, you're right, getting down, but man, there's just a character in this team, JJ. There's just a character that they have that's like, they're gonna keep pushing. They're going to keep pushing, and a guy like Con Knueppel, there were a couple of times in the second half where, he would get that ball, and you're always scared he's just gonna pull the three. But he got it and took it straight to the basket and used his frame to just body people and get, to hit a layup and stuff like that, man. Like, you just got to credit this team. And then locking down on defense, obviously a couple of really good games from Kaman and Big Pat. I mean, Big Pat. It's crazy to think that when Maliq Brown is healthy, you have a third option down low with the offensive skill set of Big Pat and now a developing defensive prowess, right? He's blocking more shots.
Yeah, he's had some blocked shots this past week. I was like, okay, big fella. I love it.
Yeah. So Gongba has really come on strong. I think he's got a lot of Duke fans thinking about the potential of how good he can be next season. Should Duke be able to retain his services and all of that. So yeah, it was a great weekend, man. I was texting all my people, like, we just won this tournament without 2 of our top 6 players.
Yeah.
Like, that's pretty freaking awesome.
Let's not stay in our lane for a moment. The Tar Heels made it into the NCAA tournament. Yeah,
they did. Okay, so all right. Ben Swain had a great tweet. And he has many of them, but this was a good one. He said, Auburn being the overall number 1, Louisville being an 8 seed, and UNC making the tournament. None of that makes congruent sense with a selection committee.
Yeah.
And the way that I said it is either the quad 1 wins and all of that's the metrics, either they matter, make Auburn the number 1 overall seed. Cool. But you can't do that and then put Louisville at an 8 seed and have UNC making the tournament over Indiana and West Virginia, right? So that's my first point, the inconsistency of the way that the committee put this together. Now, I have to be honest with you. In the last 2 weeks, we have played the UNC Tar Heels twice. Looking at the product on the basketball court, is the NCAA tournament team? Absolutely. That's an NCAA tournament team. Is that a team that I want to face if I'm in the tournament? Absolutely not. I don't want to face them because they've got pieces and they've got everything, not everything, but they've got pieces that can win some basketball games in the NCAA tournament. And so I think if you're old school and you're an eye test guy, it's like, okay, I get it. And let's also talk about the elephant in the room, the brand. It's UNC, man.
Yeah.
That Tuesday night 9:40 play-in game, bro, that's a snooze fest 9 times out of 10. Well, guess what? Guess what's going to happen on True TV tomorrow night at 9:40? I'm tuning in.
Yeah.
And so will tons of other people around the country. And so they are ratings. And once again, I actually would have respect for the committee if they would just say that. Hey, listen, they've earned it. Their brand is massive. If Duke was on the bubble, Duke's probably going to get the nod over West Virginia too.
But can they say, because we haven't brought up Bubba Cunningham's name at all, can they say that when your athletic director just so happens to this year be the committee chair?
Yeah, be the chair. No, they can't. And I understand he's in an impossible situation. Like, I don't envy that. I mean, when you are elected to be the chair of that and it's your turn, there's no way in the world that you could think that your team is going to be like literally on the bubble, like the actual bubble. And so, like, I don't envy him. I think it's great banter for Duke fans, right? I think it's an awesome storyline. But it's very difficult. But, at the end of the day, they're in. And
the very last team in.
And right ahead of West Virginia and Indiana, which, if I'm West Virginia and I'm Indiana, seeing Xavier and UNC get in over me, I'm pretty ticked.
Right.
But they're in, and I wouldn't want to play them. I think they're going to win their playing game, and I wouldn't want to play them.
You knew questions were going to be
asked.
Respect,
man. I'm trying to give them respect.
And you knew questions were going to be asked of the committee chair. You've got to answer them with how this happens. And Bubba Cunningham talked about they followed all protocol. Anytime North Carolina was discussed, he's not allowed to be in the room, XYZ. Then he's talking about the injury to Tucker DeVries, one of the best players on West Virginia, being a factor, although they won their best games without him being or with him being injured. So that doesn't make sense that we don't believe in them when their best player's injured, and they had their best wins with him being injured. And then you look at North Carolina, they had a quad 3 loss at home. Yeah. Shout out Jalen Blakes.
Jalen Blakes, baby.
For hitting that buzzer beater, whereas Indiana had more quad 1 wins and no quad 3 losses. But when you look at the other metrics that decide these things, of the 8 teams, the last 4 in, the first 4 out, the net rating, Ken Pom, their non-conference strength of schedule, North Carolina is first of all of those 8 teams, meaning, they should be a tournament team. When you look at, though, those quad 1 metrics, the opponents and how they perform against said tournament teams, they were 8th of 8 teams. I thought that difference was kind of crazy.
I think it's interesting, too, because for the last 6 to 8 weeks, all we've heard about from ESPN, Fox, whoever's carrying games, quad 1. This is an opportunity for a quad 1 win for so-and-so. Imagine if UNC were to beat Duke. That would be a quad 1 win. And the quad 1 narrative has been pushed on all college basketball for the last couple of seasons. And is it right? Is that justified, right? If it's not going to be the final kind of, end all be all to what they decide in the committee, then let's stop focusing so much attention on it. And, let's talk about advanced analytics. Let's talk about Evan Maya. Let's talk about Ken Pom. Let's talk about all those things, the net ratings. Let's talk about that more, because obviously those do factor in. And let's just be real. And I mean, we're heading toward what I feel like is like in this world of AI and analytics. I mean, we're really heading towards like, we're going to spit it into this formula, and this formula is going to spit it out, and you're not going to be able to argue with it doesn't matter who the committee chair is.
Right.
So.
Right. Which then wouldn't factor in things like brand. If that's the case, just don't impact Duke, because the brand's out there worldwide. We need to be a part of this thing. All right. We turned into a Carolina podcast there at the end. It's still go to hell, Carolina, and we'll keep this thing moving here.
That's right.
So, all right, Josh, always good to see you, man. You've got the Section 17 podcast, Duke Report, everything. What do you want to plug here today?
Yeah, I mean, just Duke Report for the last part of the season. Freddie's going to be courtside or with media on Friday and Sunday of this week. I'm going to be plan is to be up in Newark for Sweet 16 and Elite 8. So we'll be bringing you as much coverage as we possibly can. Hopefully Duke continues to run. And JJ, as we talked about last year, man, we just keep having these conversations. The more Duke wins, the longer we get to talk about Duke basketball.
Exactly.
Right? And so it's good for everybody.
I hate the transfer portal, man. I'm not ready to start talking about it. No. It'll be fun when it is there, so we have something to talk about. But right now, I hate it. I hate your transfer portal. Let's go win a national championship. Great to see you, man. We'll do this again soon, okay?
Have a good day, man.
All right, that's Josh Cox joining us here on today's show. That wraps up our program for today. Coming up tomorrow, more Duke conversations. Connor O'Neill's back with us on tomorrow's program. That'll do it for today's show. As always, go Duke. I'll talk to you tomorrow. My name is JJ Jackson. Thank you and good day.